to have you here with me today. Excited about the journey that we're about to embark on. So I hope that you have got yourself a comfortable space. If you are like me, I tend to listen to podcasts while I'm at the gym. So if you're at the gym, go you. If you're just at home cooking, which is something else I tend to do, I tend to cook as I listen and watch podcasts. Wherever you are, I'm just hoping that you are comfortable, you're in a space where you can just relax, unwind, and listen. Today is really about me just inviting you into my space. I want to start our relationship off by just being vulnerable and sharing my story. I don't want to say today I want to be vulnerable because that implies that I am not vulnerable at other times. I want vulnerability to set the tone for, where we're going. I mean, the whole podcast is about being transparent and coming together and saying, hey, look, we don't know what we're doing, but let's not know together and let's then figure it out together. By default, then we all need to be vulnerable and go, hey, Mimi Sidri, or I don't know. Let's go along together. Let's find out, let's discuss, let's deliberate, let's, laugh at each other, let's cry together, whatever it takes, but let's just grow together. So one of the things I wanted to do before we start, and I've got my phone here, bear with me. Let me put my kachai down. I brought my Kleenex just in case it goes there, and it potentially will, but you know what? We'll find a middle ground. This is all about vulnerability, and it's about being able to just share your emotions. But one of the things I loved that I wanted to share is Brene Brown's one of her. She has so many quotes on vulnerability, and obviously she's an expert in the field. She's been studying vulnerability for such a long time. But one of my favorite quotes here is, "Vulnerability is the birthplace of love, belonging, joy, courage, empathy, and creativity." She goes on to say that vulnerability is not weakness, it's actually our greatest measure of courage. I love that because, it's an invitation, when someone is being vulnerable, and I don't mean just meaninglessly putting all your stuff out there, but just having the courage to be truthful and be courageous and talk about stuff is also an invitation for others to do the same. When we're vulnerable, we find out, hang on, I'm not alone. There's other people that have gone through the same thing or potentially going through the same thing at the same time. And so that's what we're doing today. I just wanted to set that tone, and, kudos to Brené Brown for her studies on vulnerability and just allowing us that space. So I guess today what it is all about is about me talking about my journey into parenthood, parenting, where it all started and where I'm at today. And I have a feeling that this might be in two parts. We'll see how we go. I can tend to talk. So without further ado, I guess I'm going to get into it. Where does one start? I guess I always wanted to be a mom. That's just, I don't know, most people think by default that that's every girl or every child. I don't know. There's friends that I've talked to that are like, nah, not really, not me, wasn't even part of but for me, I think for as long as I can remember, going all the way back to childhood, I always wanted to be a mom. I was excited about the prospect of one day being a mom. I didn't grow up with too many dolls. In fact, I don't even remember clinging to any one particular toy and going, this is my child, this is my baby type thing. I look at my daughter now and she has a couple of baby dollies that she really clings to. I don't recall having that. I grew up with brothers, so maybe that's part of the reason. But in terms of wanting to be a parent, I knew that I wanted that. Life lifed, and by default, I reflect now, and I think I became a mom by default at about age 10. My mom passed away due to sickness. And so we were raised by a single dad who was determined not to remarry. For him, it was all about, I don't want anyone to come into our home and cause you guys to suffer without me knowing. He was a commercial airline pilot, which meant that he was, away every now and then. And the thought for him of leaving us in the care of someone that, maybe doesn't have that attachment with us, who would cause us to suffer without his knowledge or him being blinded to it. I think those horror stories for him were like naps. So, kudos to my dad. He basically just said, my focus right now is raising my children, and that's what I'm going to focus on. And so, being the eldest, I found myself in a role. At the time, it felt like I was just being a big sister. I was just being a firstborn, and that's what it was expected. But now, when I look back, and in fact, it wasn't until a couple of years ago, my brother, the brother that follows me, mentioned it to me and said, you were never really a sister to us. You're actually always a mom, you know? And then I reflected and I was like, actually, as an adult now, I can look back at those actions and think, oh yeah, I was actually being a mom. Um, so everything from whenever we needed new school uniform, I'd be the one to raise my hand and say, Dad, I think my brothers need new pairs of socks because these have holes in them. Or, I don't know if you all went through primary school. What is it with primary school kids, by the way, and chewing the ends of their sweaters? What was I? I don't know if I was the only one that did that or my brothers, but then we used to do that. So, after a year or two, you'd find your standard 6, standard 7 sweater. You've colored the ends of it. You now need a new one because it has shimmers or holes. So, yeah, I'd be the one to call those things out. I remember I have written grocery shopping lists for as long as I can remember. Like it just, I'd be like, okay, we need eggs, we need laundry detergent, we need this, we need that. I'd be the one to say to Dad, hey, I think we need more, sufurias, or Dad, we need salad bowls, or, and he gave me that free reign. He's like, um, my mom had also really worked on my dad. I think she had been a really good influence. Dad kept a really nice and neat home. Like if you looked at our home, you'd probably think that there was a woman in it, but Dad has always been a stickler for neatness and stuff like that. So we kind of then got raised into that. So by default, I was a mom. I would be strict with my brothers when they were not doing their homework as soon as they came from school. So I was momming myself. I was momming my brothers if Dad wasn't there. So yeah, now I can reflect on it and say that I have been a mom since I was about 10 years old. But in terms of like physically actually having my own, I guess that happened much, much later in life. And when I say life, I thought that by 28, I would have my dream job. I would have my husband. I would have my kids. You know how you plan for your life, but then life can tend to take its own turn. And so that's what happened this time. And I found that, I got married much later in life, sort of in my late 30s. And so there was no doubt in my husband's mind and he was already in his 40s. So as soon as we got together, we're like, okay, first agenda is let's get kids, because we felt that TikTok. And so we set about getting pregnant. And thanks be to God, as soon as we got married, we conceived and found out that we were pregnant. Super, super excited to be expecting and not having gone through, because we thought, oh my gosh, it's a bit later in life. We thought that we would have to go through this whole journey of trying but that wasn't the case. And so we are super excited. We are now kind of like doing all the research that we can. You can imagine we're first-time parents. We are talking to friends that have had kids before. Who do you recommend? Who's your OBGYN? We're already thinking about schools, but it's like, hang on, okay, let's, come back kidogo. Like, let's start thinking about, which hospital are we going to have this child at and all of that. And so, I want to talk a little bit about the journey to finding the right OBGYN for us. And I also want to talk a little bit about the state of healthcare in this country. I say this with all due respect. I have really, really good friends that are doctors that work in great hospitals. But I also really strongly believe that we need to be our own advocates, not just women, but men, just anybody that finds themselves in a situation where they need a medic. It is important to be your own advocate, to know what to look out for, to do your own research. And you have a right to go for a second, third, fourth opinion. It is so important because, doctors are human beings just like you and me. And in as much as they have the knowledge, they are also influenced by their own personal opinion. They're influenced by their own lens on life and how they would do life. And I could give countless examples. So this is not to bash any doctors. This is not to bash the medical system, but just to, I guess, highlight the importance of us as in individuals, and doctors are individuals. They themselves end up being patients at one time or another. How important it is to advocate for yourself and to do your own research and also go with your gut. Like, just trust your instincts. It's so important. And so as we were shopping around, and I hate to use the word shopping around, but you know what I mean? Like, as we were doing research and trying to find out from friends, like, hey, who did you use? Who would you recommend? There was one doctor that came so highly recommended. I want to share this example because, anyway, as we go along, I'll give my views on it. But there was this one doctor that came so highly recommended. We'd heard about him from not just this one particular friend that said, this is who you should go for. I think there was another friend that also mentioned them, and we're like, oh my gosh, what a coincidence. And apparently he was the go-to doctor in Nairobi. Like, everyone was like, oh yeah, that guy, he's helped so many women deliver their babies, blah, blah, blah. You should definitely go see him. And so my husband and I are excited. We're like, yes. I don't know what our expectations were, really, to be honest, because this is our first kid. And then we'd only just discovered we're only a few weeks expectant. We're probably, when I think about it, we're probably around the 7-week mark. And so we set an appointment. We get there, and I remember sitting in the waiting room. It was really, really nice, and in a really nice building. I don't want to go too much into, because again, I'm not here to discredit any doctor or anyone, so I'm not going to mention names or places, just because I want to be able to at least protect their identity and their clinics. But it was a really, really nice clinic that we went into, and on all the walls were just pictures of baby upon baby upon baby. And I love that it was obviously women who'd had these babies that had then shared the pictures, and they'd been posted on all the walls. And I guess my husband and I had this sense of excitement, like, okay, this guy, he's done a good job. Obviously, there's so many people that are happy with what he's done, and enough that after the fact they have sent their photos through. And then again, how complex can it be? I mean, really, in my mind, I'm thinking, this is a doctor who's going to walk through the journey of your pregnancy with you, and then ensure that you have a safe delivery. And of course, as soon as the baby is born, that becomes a whole other doctor's job. Now, obviously, they move on to having a pediatrician. So that's how 1+1 it is in my mind. For me, I'm like, you go in, you walk the journey with the doctor, and then you have the baby, and then you move on to another doctor, etc. And so we're waiting to see this doctor. Our appointment was at the tail end of the day. So I think our appointment would have been around 4 o'clock, if not 3 o'clock. But I know that it was the tail end of the day. We were probably the last appointment for the day. Not probably, we were actually, in fact, the last appointment for the day. And so I can't remember all the details, but I do remember, obviously, I needed to do a urine test. So, you're given a cup, go do your business. So I did that. It was interesting to me that it was an open cup. And when I say an open cup, I mean like water dispenser open cup. Most places that they collect that kind of a sample, there's a lid, there's a whole process. You put it in a bag, someone takes it away. But this was an open cup. I'm like, this is kind of weird. What if someone mistakes it for something else? I was like, okay, that's just how things are done here. All good. And so I did that. I gave my sample to someone, they labeled it, and they took it away. Next thing, I was asked to step into a changing room, and I was told, look, there'll be a gown hanging behind the door. You slip into that. Now, me, I tend to be one of those, I'm like, has anyone worn this? Like, I wasn't asking the question, but I'm thinking about it. I'm like, has anyone worn this gown before me? How can I be sure that it's clean? But it's not like they gave me any other option. And then in my head, again, not having an expectation of what's about to happen, I'm thinking, why do I need to strip down? And they're like, strip right down, like nothing except this little gown. I'm thinking, why do I need to do that? I thought they were just going to do an ultrasound. And from the movies, because that's what I was going by, right? It's just a matter of lifting up your t-shirt. The doctor does the gel thing, and then I don't know, they do the, that's what I thought. So I slip into this gown and I'm thinking, oh dear God, I hope no one else has worn it before me because it doesn't feel very hygienic. Eek. And then we get guided into a room. My husband and I go in, and there's a bed, there's curtains, but nobody pulls them around. They're just like, lie down, just. And I'm like, is there a sheet? Is there something I can use to cover myself? Because the bed was facing the door. So what that means is as people were coming in and out, I'm like right in the view of whoever's walking past the corridor. So I'm already starting to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Thank God then my husband was standing at the end of the bed. So he kind of became my cover, if you like. We at this point, my husband and I are very vocal people. Like but at this point, we're not saying anything. Why? Because we don't know what to expect. We're just grateful to be expectant. We're so overjoyed with that we're like, just do what they say to do. Just follow the instructions. So that's what we're thinking. Just follow the instructions, just do as you're told type thing. You don't want to upset the system. And then this doctor has come so highly recommended. We've waited a while to get this appointment. So just play the part. So we wait and we wait and we wait. 20 minutes I'm there, lying down, feeling a bit, it was a very short gown. It wasn't like a long flowy type gown. It was a very short gown. And I'm on that bed waiting for this guy to come in, and a nurse comes in. I don't even want to go into the detail of what I saw, but let's just say that there was a wand on there. And I don't even know if I need to, I want to be vulnerable, but I also want to be appropriate because of, I don't know where you're watching this. I don't know. Yeah. So let's just say there was a wand on there, and in my head, and my husband and I are looking at that wand thinking, is that supposed to go somewhere? Is that supposed to probe? Is that supposed to go? No one's telling us what's happening. We just know that the doctor's going to come in and examine me. So he finally comes in, but and this is without being dramatic, and I can be dramatic. I'm one of those people. I'm like, boo, doosh, like, but he came in like that. He came in, boom, like the door was opened in a very flamboyant way. It swung wide open, so much so that my husband and I shook her, like we kind of got, yeah, like what's going on, type thing. Look towards the door. Here comes the doctor. But he came flanked by like an entourage of people. There was probably 4 or 5 other people with him. Yeah. From what we could tell, he's obviously a teaching doctor. Yeah. And so he's come in with students. No, all he said was when he came in, he's like, these are my students. There was no, hey, is it okay? Are you comfortable for me to have this be a teaching moment? He just said, hello, I'm Dr. So-and-so. These are my students. I'll be examining you today. It was very cold. And I'm not saying that every doctor has to, you don't have to be Oprah. You don't have to be like, but just the bedside manner does matter. And I think there's a reason that there's that term, someone's bedside manner. So it was very cold. It was very mechanical. It was very, hey, I'm Dr. So-and-so. Like I've arrived. I'm here now. And then he goes, push your knees up to your chest. So I have these 5 eyes. I've got my husband and I've got the doctor. So now it's 6 pairs of eyes. Again, the curtains haven't been drawn. Bear with me. The curtains haven't been drawn because obviously we can't accommodate this school situation that we have here. Again, husband and I not saying anything because we're just like, hey, this doctor has come in so highly recommended. We don't want to offend him. We want the best for our baby. So just play the part. But at this point, my heart is thumping. I'm like, my business is about to be out there for the whole world. Well, the 7 pairs of eyes now to see, And my husband is also looking bewildered, like, what is happening right now? Again, no one is explaining what's happening. All the doctor says is, get your knees right up to your chest and then open up. We're going to do a test. So then and in my head, I'm thinking, are we not doing an ultrasound? Are we not, what does he mean open up? Is it safe for him? All these thoughts are going through my mind. Is it safe for him to go in? Is he wanting to, what is happening? And that's when I found out that, what the procedure was called, or that he performed at that time was a transvaginal, I've forgotten the full term, but essentially they do go in and have a look. It's an alternative, I guess, to, doing an ultrasound, because at this point the pregnancy was so early. But again, nobody gave us that bit of a background to explain what was about to happen. So we're then now researching for ourselves, like, wait a minute, what just happened? So he does his exam. I'm obviously not relaxed because there's all these eyes looking at my business. And he says, you need to relax. Just like that. And in my head, I'm thinking, oh, yeah, let me just get that switch. Let me just relax. And I said to him, I'm trying. And he said, yep, it's the only way. So there's a little bit of a, that sigh of frustration, like, you're not the first patient. Patient. Just threw that in there. Comic effect. You're not the first patient. When you get that feeling like you're not the first patient he's seen that day. And so can you firstly, again, it's not to bash male doctors, but what does he know about what it takes to relax? Do you know what I mean? It's very much a mental, emotional, psychological state of being. I have 7 pairs of eyes looking at me. Nobody has ever seen my nakedness. Nobody has ever, in this way. It's a show. It's a teaching moment. And I'm right there. And the man is frustrated and sighing with a, please relax. And so I said, look, I'm trying. And so I gathered myself together and I'm like, we're doing this for our baby. We want the best for our baby. So just relax. And so I relaxed. He did what he needed to do. And, he concluded, look, this pregnancy is it's very early stages. But, from what I can tell, this is how far along you are. And then he turns to one of his students. I can't remember what he said, because the whole time I'm just like, can we close up now? Can you cover me up now? He finishes, and as pompously as he came in, he pompously walks out and goes, okay, I'll see you in another 3 weeks. You'll talk to the nurse. They'll tell you what to do next. And he walks out, and of course his troop follows after him, and the door is closed. Mind you, the door was open. Of course, then my husband had to stand at the end of the bed again to be my cover, so that my business is not out there for any patients or nurses or anyone walking outside. And so my husband looks at me, I'm looking at him, and he says to me, what just happened? And I said, I have no idea. We were so uncomfortable about the whole ordeal. Of course, then the nurse comes in, wipes me down, and then tells me, you're just going to go back into that same change room, and you're going to hang the little gown behind the door. Already I'm thinking, wait a minute, does that mean that the next patient that comes into that same changing room is going to wear that same the horror. But that's not even, so of course I went in, I got changed, and I'm just feeling not so great about that first appointment. I'm already thinking, I don't know if I want to see this person ever again, this particular doctor. The experience was just, when it just left a bad taste in my mouth. I couldn't wait to get home and shower, to be honest, because I was just thinking about, and maybe you guys are thinking I'm a bit excessive, but I'm like that. I'm like, I don't want to think that someone else had been wearing the gown before me and all of that. And so I was thinking to myself, what is the big deal about this doctor? Am I missing something? A lot of times when somebody's raving about someone, you always assume that it's going to be, oh my gosh, it was an amazing experience. This doctor treated me with dignity. They were so friendly. They were so warm. Nah, none of that. So I was like, what magic? What is the amazing, what's his wow thing that has made so many women in Nairobi say, that's the doctor that you need to see? And so we change, and I was obviously the last appointment for the day because as my husband and I are walking back into the basement to get into the car, we nearly got ran over by a car that was hurrying out. I don't know, maybe he was rushing to help a woman who was in theater about to have a baby. I don't know. But it was the doctor that nearly ran us over. So already, by the time we sat in the car, I turned to my husband. I said, I don't ever want to come back here again. And he said, I was just about to tell you the exact same thing. I don't think I ever want to see this guy again. And I was like, okay, we're agreed on that. So I never ever did go back for the results of my urine test. I mean, okay, I think we'd concluded that we were pregnant, but I guess they test for other stuff. But yeah, it was just not such a great experience. And I guess when a woman is going through that, when you are especially pregnant for the first time, there was no question around, hey, is this your first pregnancy? And again, I'm not saying that doctors have to be this woohoo excited. And I mean, as it is, you've gone through medical school, that's a lot. And now, but there's that sense of candor and just that sense of, I think there's a psychological element to when you study medical and how to relate to your patients. There was just none of that. There was no bedside at all. Even just, hi, how are you today? How are you feeling? Is this your first pregnancy? Are you excited? Like, nah, maybe. And then I was thinking about the students that he had in the room. They're looking and going, this is exactly how you treat your patients. Like, I don't know what that whole veneer of I'm not connecting with my patient. I don't know if there was bad news that he'd gotten. Maybe we just caught him on an off day. But no, we didn't, because much later we talked to another couple, friends of ours, who, without us knowing, had actually seen this guy because we were sharing our experience with them. And they were like, wait, is that doctor based here? Is his name such and such? And we're like, yes. And they're like, guys, we even went back a second time. We're like, you guys even managed to go back a second time? They were like, yes. They were so shocked at the fact, because their first experience was exactly what we went through. But they were so convinced because this guy comes so highly recommended. He comes so highly recommended that they were convinced we just caught him on an off day. Kind of like what I kept telling my husband. Do you think we just caught him on an off day? He's like, nah, that's just not a good doctor. And so they went back a second time, but it was exactly the same experience. No connection, like just let's get to business, blah, blah, blah. And they concluded, we don't want to see this doctor. So again, for the life of me, don't know why he comes in highly recommended. Maybe those women have caught him on a good day, or maybe to them it doesn't matter about the bedside manner as it is just getting the skill that is required to bring, home a healthy, baby. I don't know. I haven't gone back to even find out from my friend who recommended him what her recommendation was based off of, and I don't blame her for recommending me what ended up being a poor experience. Like it is what it is in the world of referrals, right? Not everyone's going to be your flavor. So we move on from there, and we decided to go with a doctor that, had been tried and tested. Tried and tested in the sense that he had handled a few of our relatives, different issues. One particular relative had delivered 2 kids, no dramas, no problems. And his bedside manner was apparently really amazing. And also another relative who had a separate gynecological issue and had a really good experience with him. So, again, based on those 2, we were like, okay, let's give this particular doctor a go. Again, here, my experience was shocking. Not shocking in the sense of the bedside manner, because we did end up going with this doctor and seeing the pregnancy through. But it was more around when we got to the waiting room. Firstly, when I called through to book an appointment, I was told, hey, get here as early as you can. And I said, okay, no problem. Because they said, but we don't do appointments. And so you are going to need to, we do a fast come, fast serve basis. So you want to be here as early as possible. I found that really strange because I'm like, it's a very specific issue. It's not like I'm going into, casualty for a hospital where it's like fast come, fast serve, because there's hundreds of people sometimes sitting in the waiting room. No, this is a clinic, and you already know that you are expecting. So it's a very, I don't know, I thought that you just book an appointment and then they'll have 10 maybe ladies for the day. So those were my thoughts. But she said, you come in as early as you can. I'm thinking, okay, cool. What time do I need to be there? She said, look, our doors open at 6:30 in the morning. I'm like, huh? Yeah, our doors open at 6:30 in the morning. Um, the doctor doesn't come in until around 10. But again, because it's first come, first serve, it's best if you could try and be here as early as that. I'm in shock because this has not been my experience. I had been living overseas prior to this. So in my head, I'm like, yeah, it's not straightforward. You make an appointment when I went back to those two people that had referred the doctor, they were like, yeah, look, he's really, really good. But a lot of the gynas, if you want to see them in Kenya, this tends to be the way. You get there as early as possible, and then you just wait. My husband was like, okay, not ideal, but you know what? Let's do it. We're trying to get the very best for our baby. This is our first baby. We're excited. So if this is what we have to do, so be it. So there I am. I've woken up at 5:30. I've dragged my husband out. Obviously he's not going to be able to make every appointment because he has to go to work. I was working, but it was a bit more flexible for me because I was working for a family business at the time. So yeah, just get in the car, drive there. So it was still dark when we got there. We found a parking spot, obviously, because, and we were there at 6:30, but I was the 11th. I remember that. I was in shock. We're there at 6:30, but I was the 11th woman on that list. And they just kept coming through the door. They kept coming through the door. And I'm thinking, when does this stop? Because it got to a point where, mind you, the waiting room, I wish I could show you the size of the room that I'm in because it's not a big room. But at the same time, that waiting room was about the size of this room. Like, it was tiny, it was cramped. The sitting was probably enough to accommodate, I would say, comfortably. I mean, remember, most of the women here are all expectant. But it's a gynae's office, so not everyone is expecting. But when you're expecting, you want to be comfortable. You don't want to be seated in like a kind of tight space. You want to be able to elevate your legs. You're tired. But I would say comfortably, it should have been able to sit maybe 10 to 12 expectant ladies. But what I experienced from the number of appointments that I went into, there was probably about 20 at any one given time. And I'm like, how? Firstly, how many women is this doctor seeing in a single day? Those were the questions running through my mind. There happened to be a Java nearby, so the lady would write our names down and say, look, the doctor's not going to be in until 11. You have the option, if you live nearby, to go home and we'll call you closer to the time, or you can go do other stuff that you want to do. I can't guarantee that we'll call you, but I just want you to know that you are our 11th. And if the doctor's coming in at 10, that means that you're probably not going to get seen until maybe 1-ish, maybe, assuming that each appointment is every 20 minutes. I don't know, do the math. But, so we had those options. Now, we lived not too far, but enough for us to make the determination that, especially just seeing how difficult it was to get parking, we figured, you know what, the easier thing for us to do is just go to the Java, have breakfast, come back, and then, just wait. What else do you do? And so that's what we did. Came back. Of course, there's nowhere to sit. So you're milling around. They have air conditioning, but then that air conditioning would work sometimes and sometimes not. Washrooms, they didn't have washrooms because it is a big building with lots of these clinics or offices. So if you wanted to use the washroom, it was an affair of going up to reception. It's just, anyway, they cut you some toilet paper, then you walk over to the toilet and, the toilets in this particular building were really well maintained, I have to say, but they were obviously shared with other offices in the building. So that wasn't an issue, but it was not a very comfortable situation. And I remember thinking to myself, man, the person that referred this doctor, they went through all this and they were okay with it. I remember talking to her after it and she was like, that's just the way it goes, I've been to a few other different gynas, and especially the highly recommended ones, this just tends to be the way. So when I finally saw the doctor, mind you, the wait was a wait. It was a wait. It was a wait. And I remember my husband saying to me, I don't think I can do this again. I'm so sorry. I would love to come to every appointment for my baby, but I don't think I can do this because unless I bring my work laptop and sit down here and do this. And it's like, I think my seat where I would be seated would be more beneficial to, an expectant lady than me just sitting there. So you are better off just going on the appointments on your own moving forward, because I was there for, I probably didn't end up seeing the doctor until early afternoon. So you can imagine I've been there since 6:30 in the morning. I've been up since 5 a.m. I've had that big breakfast at Java. Thank God they had a coffee slash like a hot chocolate type machine situation. Did they have biscuits there? I can't remember. But I thankfully had packed a snack. And so I saw him just afternoon. I remember thinking, man, this when people say the labor of love, like these are the heights that people go to for their kids. Sawa, I'll do it. So when I saw the doctor, he was really amazing. When I say amazing, just a really kind, warm person. Hi, how are you? Not very talkative. Not at all. Hi, how are you? Welcome. Okay, please be seated here. No, there was no transvaginal testing or any of that being done. It was more of an ultrasound, because this was, I think, by the time we went to see this particular doctor, it was probably a week or two after that initial doctor. And so he does an ultrasound, and he had a specialized system that you get 3D images of your child. So it's very, very exciting. So of course, at this stage, my pregnancy it's too early in the pregnancy to really get a proper view of the baby per se. I can't even remember what that first test was, but I do remember thinking after I encountered him and even that interaction, in as much as he wasn't talkative, and I am a talkative, if you can't tell, a talkative person, but in as much as he didn't really say much, it was more his demeanor, how kind he was, and even the questions that he asked and the instruction that he gave me around, okay, supplements and stuff like that. I did a lot more of the talking because I was asking a lot of questions, and he would then offer the information, and then I left. But I thought, you know what? It was worth it. It was worth it just because he treated me with dignity. He seemed really concerned and very warm. And so I thought, you know what? This will be the doctor. We don't want to be shopping around. And my husband was also really insistent. He said, look, I seemed to really like the guy. I think we can go ahead with this particular one. And so we did. I'm gonna rush it along, but I'm gonna pause for a moment here actually and say that it again is so important that you advocate for yourself. And I don't just mean be vocal about stuff. Absolutely, yes, ask questions. But when I say advocate for yourself, is also go ahead and do the research. Go online, find out what are the critical tests that should be done at different stages of the pregnancy. What are the tests that need to be done at, say week 7, week 11, X number of months? At what point am I supposed to be getting a shot for vitamin A? When, what are the indicators for gestational diabetes and all that sort of stuff that might get missed when a doctor has 20 to 30 appointments in a day. And what I noticed progressively over time as I kept going back to this doctor at the different stages that I was supposed to, is I didn't have a personal relationship with him. He was just a very polite, kind person, but he did not know me. You can imagine if you're seeing 20 to 30 people in a day. I don't even know if that is legal. Like, I don't know. I know with pilots, when you're flying, and I say this because I come from an aviator's family, I know that there's only a certain number of hours that you can fly, that there's a legal threshold. You know what I mean? Because you are now endangering yourself, you're endangering your passengers, you're endangering people on the ground. You cannot fly over a certain number of hours because of exhaustion. You're not going to make calculated, like, proper decisions. You're not, so there's that. So I would like to think that in the medical profession, there's a limit. Like, hey, you can't see this many, because at some point you're going to compromise the quality of care that you're giving. You're going to, I don't know. But as I sat looking at that waiting room, I'm like 20 to 30, like, So I realized over time he actually didn't know me. He would look at my file and go, okay. And then he would ask me questions like, did I test you for blood sugar last time? And I'm like, no, you didn't. Oh, okay. And then have I, obviously looking at the report because he would record everything. And I'm not saying that every doctor has to remember every single patient that they see, but you understand my concern that if someone is seeing 20 to 30 people in a day, and then in between, obviously, rushing to hospital to help women deliver their babies, you don't necessarily have a personal relationship. There's a sense of a personal relationship, but there's not really one. And so I was like, it doesn't matter. This guy is really polite. He's really good. And I was excited about getting the 3D scans of the baby, especially as the child started to develop. And he said, look, now is the time we can start taking those 3D scans and you can start really seeing the features of your baby. It was super exciting. There was an element of color to them as well. And so I would take those home and show them to my husband and to my mother-in-law and my dad. Like just say, hey, look, this is who it is. And so it was a daughter, it was a girl. And we were so excited. We went about getting names. We went about, I was starting to do my own research on the side as well, starting to get ready. There was this whole debate in my mind around, do I do a home birth? Because that was a thing. A shout out to Shikonguru, who I was following at that time. She, I think, had, it wasn't a podcast, but it was like a vlog. I think it was called the Green Calabash at the time. And I had watched her have a home birth and I was like, oh my goodness, this is possible in Kenya. There are people who are able to render this service. And so I was really excited about it. My husband, not so much, because he's like, nah, anything and everything could go wrong with a home birth. So there was a little bit of a debate there. The rest of my family didn't think that it was a good idea, but I was adamant that, it's the best environment for the child to come into and all of that. I finally caved, by the way. We agreed to have it at a hospital somewhere. But there was this whole hype, this whole excitement, So yes, we did the name thing. We got a name and we're like, this is actually my nephew one day, because they knew that there was a baby in Auntie Bella's belly. And he would have been about 5 years old at the time. And we were driving somewhere one day and I said to him, hey, what do you think we should call the baby? And just out of the blue, he said, Casey. And I said, wow, why Casey? And he said, I just like that name. And so we settled on that. Of all the names he could have come up with, because I guess he was probably picking one of his childhood friends, in the neighborhood. Could have been Jerry, Njoki, Mary. I don't know. He just said, I think we should call the baby Casey. And so we were so excited to have baby Casey coming along. I was eating right. I was giving this baby everything. I was like, I'm going to eat healthy. I was doing my research on even doulas, someone that is not necessarily a midwife, but somebody who is like your birthing coach and handholds you through the entire process. I actually then went out and I was referred a doula. And this is a big shout out to Shira Shiera, who was my doula at the time. She was going to be my doula for the birth. And so we started doing exercises with her. We actually started to have home visitations with her because then she was preparing my husband as to how to be the best partner, because I wanted to have a natural birth. And so, helping my husband along, well, how do you, and mind you, this was around, it was at the peak of COVID. So chances were that she wasn't going to be allowed to go into the hospital with us, but that only my husband could go in. And so she began coaching my husband on breathing techniques for me and how to help me through that. Some of the preparations that we would have to do after the baby was born and what my husband, support for me would look like when I came home or when we came back home. Then also supporting my husband around, obviously with trimester 3, the more tired that I would get, some of the exercises that we would do to help the baby, go into the birth canal, to lower and position herself, all of this stuff, Shira was helping us with at home. And the excitement levels, again, I can't even begin to tell you. I'm the eldest child of my father. My brother that follows me had already had a son, but there was just that excitement that, oh my gosh, now the firstborn of our family is also going to have a baby. So there was mad excitement everywhere. On my husband's side, he is the only male, living male, child of my parents-in-law. So there was excitement about him having a child. His sister had already had two kids at this point. So there's just excitement galore. I remember I used to prepare meals in the kitchen, and I had a sense that this was a dancing baby because of the way that she would kick. And just, I'm like, I feel like this is a dancing baby. Like I used to say to my husband, I don't know what it is, but I feel like this kid is all about rhythm. 1 minute. So I would dance, I would prepare meals, I would, you know, just get excited about what was about to happen. We had already started shopping, and man, I think I'm gonna do a whole series on preparing for a baby in Kenya. What? It is expensive, my friends. It is expensive. Um, and where we looked and what our plugs are, because I'm sure that there's first time moms and dads out there who are like, this is our budget. What do we do? How do we, and if you're in a situation where you can get hand me downs and all of that, that's great. We didn't really have that. My husband and I had been living overseas for quite a number of years. In fact, almost 2 decades each year. My husband just under 2 decades, and myself, I'd been 22 years away from Kenya. So a lot of our friends have moved on. I mean, a lot of our friends at the time would have been people that you knew in high school that have moved on. So we don't really necessarily, and then being the first ones, maybe in our families having children, not necessarily having a situation where somebody can say, oh my gosh, here is all my kids' clothes that you could potentially use. My sister-in-law had two boys, so we didn't really have much in the way of little girls' clothes, but she gave us what she could. She's like, hey, here's something to get you started and a little bit of guidance. But I think I'm going to actually just do a whole other episode on shopping and preparing for your baby, because that is something else. So there was that. There was preparing for the baby. There was shopping for the baby. There was we didn't think about doing a baby shower, but somebody did throw us a baby shower, and this was a few weeks to having the baby. So I want to talk a little bit maybe next time, because we do need to wrap it up here. I want to talk next time around what happened in the way of, there was no medical scare. In fact, the only time I ever had a medical scare was one time feeling really faint. But then I also hadn't eaten. So I felt faint, and I fainted in the car. My husband had to shake me awake while on the highway, pull away from the highway and get me something to eat. And we both realized I hadn't carried any snacks that day. I'd been standing for a long time. So we concluded that was the reason why I fainted. But I'm at term. I probably am about 8-9 months now. And so I want to talk a little bit about what happened at this stage, that were indicators that something was wrong, but we didn't think that they were indicators. We thought, oh, like that particular day that I fainted, oh, it's because she didn't have anything to eat. It made sense. We called our doctor from the car, and he said it was all good. So I'm going to go into that on our next episode. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, we will continue where we left off. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey. Bye. I'm done? Okay, sorry. So they kept coming through the door. Yeah, that is something else. So so where was I? La.